Hey, well, good afternoon, nonfiction branders. It's been a while since I've done a GarageBand podcast editing 101 episode. Hold on a second, I gotta make sure you guys are hearing me and that my system audio is working. So let's see what happens here. Okay, so you guys can hear that. Great. Because in the past I've had some problems, and I just want to make sure my Facebook comments line is up and ready for commentary from you guys. If you have any questions about podcast editing or what I'm doing or why I'm doing it, you chime in. This is what I do every single Saturday because my Nonfiction Brand podcast comes out every Monday. Now, if I were smart, I would batch process these things, or even smarter, I'd have someone else do it for me. But I'm a cheap ass rat bastard who has a little bit of a perfection complex, or it's weird. I have this combination of I do the very best I can and it's never good enough. It could be better. There's a mistake. I have to correct it. And if I give it to someone else to do it, they're going to have even more mistakes. So I'm very accepting of the fact that people are not perfect, but I'm not very good at delegating stuff that requires a level of attention to detail and, dare I say, perfection to other people because I have trust issues. Let's just put it that way. Yeah, I have trust issues. Anyway, every Saturday I work on my podcast, Nonfiction Brand, because I have to have a new episode come out on Monday. And the only way I'm going to be able to do that... Oh, hold on. Do I want to change my lights a little bit? Hold on. Let's improve the lighting. So let's see what this does. Does it make it a little bit better, a little bit more dramatic, or a little bit more shiny on my forehead? Probably. Oh, let's see what this looks like. Oh, the shine is still there. Nothing I can do about that. So I'm just going to keep it pretty simple by maintaining my... hold on a second. I can actually do a real-time check in lighting change. All right. So I'm real-time lighting directing. But, you know, this is the live stream. So what do you want? What do you want? Do you want a scripted show? Watch TV. This is on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, and Twitch. And so you should be very accepting by now of the fact that people go live and have no flipping idea of what they're going to say or what they're going to do. Well, in my case, I know exactly what I'm doing, which is I'm going to work on my podcast. I'm going to edit the new episode that comes out on Monday. And to do that, I use the free program that comes with Apple products, Apple GarageBand. Right? So let's go over to GarageBand. This is what it looks like. You guys know what GarageBand looks like, right? Well, this is my basic setup for getting ready to edit my podcast. So the first thing I'm going to do is... got to find the actual session. Okay, so here's the Zoom session that I am recording from. So first thing I'm going to do is grab my audio track and drag it on in all the way to the zero. Make sure it goes all the way to zero, because I'm going to do the same thing with my guest Andy Crestodina's track. I'm going to go all the way to zero because they need to maintain synchronization. And were I to like put them in slightly different places, they're going to be off. And you know, because it's only 2 tracks, it's not a tremendous pain to deal with, but it is a bit of a pain. And I'm going to move these things a little bit, but first of all, I need to find out where the conversation really starts. So hold on while I do this on this computer. There we go. That way I don't have to pester you for files.
It's just as easy. You're right. Yeah. I record things to the cloud lately sometimes, just because then you have a file. I don't want a file.
Yeah, well, I do want the files because yeah. Well, anyway, thank you so much for joining me again. You know,
a lot of blah blah.
because I really enjoyed our conversation. Reason for this, and that is I'm working on a book called Not a Podcast, and as I wanted to talk to you again, and I want to write about the Andy Crestodina, and what I wanted to write about was how you embraced internationally renowned personal brand. And but at the same time, I'm like, well, how can we start this conversation? And then you so kindly. All right, so I can grab a lot of this stuff. Yeah, well, I do want the files because don't need this. It's a kind of a suspenders belt thing. I don't. Yeah, yeah. Well, anyway, thank you so much for joining me again. All right, so I'm going to grab it right at thank you so much, which I think starts right there. Thank you so much for joining. Great. So I'm going to make sure both tracks are highlighted or selected, and I'm going to hit Command T for trim or whatever GarageBand calls it, and I'm going to get rid of this junk because I don't need it. And I've got it saved elsewhere, so don't worry about that. That's the key thing. Never make anything. Oops, see? Ooh, do not drag one track at a time. Make sure you're always grabbing both to maintain synchronization. And, you know, there might be a way to do this, auto sync or something, but this is my hand, do it by hand way. I'm going to go ahead and turn on the music bed because I need to do a little bit of automation lookage at. So, music in. Thank you so much for joining me again. So that thank you came in a little fast. I'm going to move that back a little. Because again, I'm going to listen musically to see where it fits best. Thank you so much for joining me again. Maybe a little bit back, a little bit more. This is very, very subjective. Thank you so much for joining me again. You know,
sure.
Let's take it back. Thank you so much for joining. Okay, so a little bit for earlier. This is very much like a or like a conductor saying, "Come in right now." Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for joining me again. You know. All right, so I need to look at this. You can see everything's fading down. Automation wise, I need to bring this part up at least until this point because you can see it gets kind of quiet in here. And thank you so much for joining me again. You know,
sure.
Because I really enjoyed our conversation on the first two episodes we did of the nonfiction. All right, so this section, don't know why, is a lot lower, so I'm going to crank that all the way up. Because I really enjoyed our conversation on the first two episodes we did of the Nonfiction Brand podcast. And as I wanted to talk to you again. All right, now I can go about editing. Oh, hold on, do this. See what that sounds like. Thank you so much for joining me again. You know,
sure.
Because I really enjoyed our conversation. All right, so now I can get rid of some of this blah blah blah. Thanks. Thank you so much for joining me again. You know,
sure.
This crap. Get rid of it, and I can do this by highlighting only one track. I can do that. I can keep Andy's Shure, which I might want to tighten up just a little bit. And to do that, all I have to do is this, because he's not saying anything before. I can move again both tracks to maintain synchronization. So much for joining me.
Sure.
Because I really that felt fast to me. Thank you so much for joining me.
Sure.
Because I really enjoy. I don't know if I like his Shure. Damn it. Don't want to do that. I want to get rid of his Shure. And instead, I'm going to grab this. So thank you so much for joining me. Because I really enjoyed our conversation. All right, so I can get rid of that. Thank you so much for joining me, because I really enjoyed our conversation on the first two. That felt a little bit obstacle-y. Thank you so much for joining me, because I really enjoyed our conversation. Did I say me again? This is one of the cool things and why I like GarageBand. You can... So much for joining me again, because I really enjoyed our... Yeah, there was an again in there. Again. So much for joining me again, because I really enjoyed our... All right, I think that'll cut well. Just buttered up together. Thank you so much for joining me again, because I really enjoyed our conversation on the... All right, check automation, which controls... That goes all the way up. Again, because I really enjoyed our conversation on the first two episodes. All right, I'm going to take out some of the gaps. Thank you so much for joining me again, because I really enjoyed our conversation on the first two episodes we did of the Nonfiction Brand podcast. And as a podcast, take out a little bit of time here. Did of the Nonfiction Brand podcast. And as I wanted to talk to you again, I actually have a little bit of a... And as I wanted to talk to you again, and I don't like that as, get rid of it, podcast. And I wanted to talk to you again, I actually have a little bit... wanted to talk to you again. I wanted to talk to you again. I actually have a little bit of a Tom Sawyer reason for this. And that is, I'm working on a book called Nonfiction Brand, Discover, Craft, and Communicate the Completely True, Completely You brand you already are. Which... All right, so that automation's fine. Completely true, completely you brand you already are, which is a name and... There's a breath in there. I want to get rid of it. I just want to see. And you already are, which is a name and quite a mouthful. And I want to write... Get rid of that. Name and quite a mouthful. And I want to write about the Andy Crestodina. And Crestodina and T, tighten it up just a little bit. The Andy Crestodina. And what I wanted to write about was, get rid of that crap. Crestodina. And what I wanted to write about was how you embraced blogging. How you embraced blogging. That's a little tight. How you embraced blogging a lot. How you embraced blogging a long time ago in a really deep way to build what I would call your internationally... Okay, this is me manually... Well, actually, I'm not going to do this, because afterwards I'm going to compress the bejesus out of this track in Audacity, or actually I might do it via the master track here in GarageBand. So I'm going to leave that for now to build what I would call your internationally renowned... Ooh, I do want to do this. I want to make sure my compressor's all the way up. It is. Everything looks good. I use vintage vocal on my mic. I think Andy sounds good for now, but we'll check that out in a minute. What I would call your internationally renowned personal brand. Okay, that click stuff on Andy's track, I'm going to get rid of by hitting Command T and just delete it out. Renowned personal brand. And see, man, dang, why is there is a lot of vocal variance in sound levels between call your internationally renowned personal brand. And but at the same time, I'm like, I can get rid of it altogether and go, but at the same time, renowned personal brand. But at the same time, I'm like, well, how can we start? But at the same time, I'm like, well, how can we start this conversation? And then you so kindly drop your and you so kindly drop your 7th annual blogging survey just this past week. And I went, bingo, right there. That's my entree.
Yeah, okay.
So Andy, can you tell us what the annual blogging survey is all about and maybe give it a little bit of gloss of that? A little bit of gloss of that personal branding, what blogging can do for you. Personal branding, what blogging can do. Get rid of the stuff you can get rid of. Gloss of that personal branding, what blogging can do for you. That person. Don't know if I like that. Gloss of that personal branding, what blogging can do for you. Was there a woo? See that beginning woo right there? What blogging can do? Let's see. What blogging can do? Yeah, so if I get rid of this woo and just leave the gap, it'll sound okay, I think. Of that personal branding, what blogging can do for you?
Sure.
Okay, so he's got sure. I'm going to get rid of that kind of squelch. Sure. Then he thinks about his answer for a while, which is fine, but I don't need my audience to wait for him to develop it. Can do for you.
Sure. I don't really do content audit.
Do for you.
Sure. I don't really do content audit.
I don't know if that works because it doesn't sound. Oh, I know what it might be. It could be that his noise gate. Let's see. I got him on Vintage Vocal 2. Go to controls. See that noise gate. Oh, that's a pretty aggressive 26. I'm going to get rid of it altogether because all of a sudden there's going to be an S on this Shure. You?
Sure. I don't really do.
Oh, or not. For you?
Sure. I don't really do.
All right, let's just leave that out and see what happens. Of that personal branding, what blogging can do for you?
I don't really do content audits most of the time, not generally speaking, but.
And tighten it up just a skosh. Branding, what blogging can do for you?
I don't really do content audits most of the time, not generally speaking, but if I did, one of the questions I would include would be something like, is there any information for which this website is the primary source? If yes.
All right, so the rest of that was okay. I'm going to leave a fairly large gap.
This website is the primary source. If yes, this brand. This brand, this publisher, this writer. This brand, this publisher, this writer, this human has a big advantage in PR.
In PR. Now, I'm not tightening up all the gaps that I normally would tighten up because one of the things I do after getting everything in shape is I take this over to Audacity, because Audacity has a great effect called truncate silence, and it'll automatically look for gaps of a certain size. And if it is a certain size, it'll shrink it by whatever setting you want it to be. It'll truncate that silence. It'll just tighten it up a little bit. So I think of it as 4/0 steel wool or sandpaper. It just takes the edges off your podcast and tightens things up. And it does so in a musical way, because it doesn't look at the whole thing and say, take everything and crunch it down to this size. It does give me 60% of what the original gap was. So it retains a little bit of its musical pausiness, if you will.
Human has a big advantage in PR, in word of mouth, in being memorable, in SEO, in social media, in email marketing, in all the metrics, right? Because
get rid of the ums. The biggest thing you can do for your guests is make them look really, really smart. And the best way to do that is getting rid of the ums and the obnoxious breath sounds.
Metrics, right? Because one of the common complaints is like,
there's a click in there, I think.
All the metrics, right? Because one of the common complaints is like,
all right, yeah,
it's like, how do I do something original? And the simple enough.
I'm just gonna hand tighten this up a little bit.
Complaints is like, how do I do something original? And the simple and obvious answer to that is to conduct original research, but it's just a little bit harder than most content, so people tend to shy away from that. But
okay, so there's a click in there. You can see this little click. And I'm going to get rid of it. I'm going to up the...
So people tend to shy away from that. But as a strategy... Shy away from that. But as a strategy, it's extremely effective. And we embraced it long ago. And...
Get rid of the keep the and.
We embraced it long ago, and one of the...
Again, make them look a little smarter by making them a little faster.
We embraced it long ago, and one of the frameworks for thinking of it is to ask yourself, like,
hey, I want to see. Should I go square? Gives me a little bit more room. The circle, I used to go circle. I'm not sure. Circle, square. I'm going to go square. Lets you see some of my guitars in the background. Makes me that much more interesting of a presenter.
But is to ask yourself, like, what is the missing statistic in my industry?
Ting.
Like, what is the missing...
All right, so I'm going to make a note here, because I think this might be a good pull quote for this episode. Going to grab an old Post-it note and just hit the recognize what the time code is here.
One of the frameworks for thinking of it is to ask yourself.
So one of the frameworks, that's at 151. 51.667. And I've already got a gap there, but what I'm going to do is give myself a visual gap so that I can see, okay, this is the start of my pull quote, right?
One of the frameworks for thinking of it is to ask yourself, like, what is the missing statistic in my industry, right? I'm publishing as a person. In my industry, right? I'm publishing as a person, and I want to be relevant. And Seth Godin sometimes says, like, the purpose of your content is to give your audience something to talk about.
Okay, so that great. Get rid of that. Hey, before I go any further, I want to find the end of this, because I want to divide this up.
Of your character and your personal brand, dare I say, which is, I'm happy for the dude because he took intellectual rigor as an engine for our web. If you create the unique, we all know the value of, you're making my head swell in a wonderful way, Andy.
That conversation,
Very, very rich with up to used.
we used, yep.
Okay.
It was just the
I'm looking for an
mechanism for the
end.
survey. I have partnered with Survey.
You've been provoked until you walk away and go, wow.
SurveyMonkey has a tool called Audience, which will actually help you get responses to your survey.
I want to find
Yeah.
the end.
You know what? If you want to say, I want a hamburger, just say, all of a sudden, you're going to find a vein of gold. And then you follow that vein of gold wherever, for the dude, because he took it, he ran with it, etc. So, boy.
Interesting, though. What you just brought up, though, is fascinating. And it's something that it stops people.
But until next week, I just want to say once again, I am DP Knudten, and he is
Andy Crestodina. Thank you for having me on.
Say again?
I was about to say, are we on the calendar?
No. I'm
We're
saying,
recording it now. Yeah. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, it's always my pleasure. We will talk to you next week. Bye-bye.
Okay, are we on the?
All right.
Right, so that's where we ended up the first episode, and then we have a conversation. And I just want to get this out of the way. I want to keep this, but I want to get it out of the way so I can always have an idea of how long the episode is. Right now, it's about 28 minutes in length. That'll shorten as I grab stuff, but I also want to make note. He had a great
Client.
We had a great conversation.
Client. And Mike.
Well, we'll get to it. All right, back to the front, or the head. Back in the days, they would call this the head, the front, or the head, and then the back would be the tail. Think of it as a dachshund, a long, short wiener dog.
About what would people talk? What would add to the conversation? So. What would people talk? What would add to the conversation?
What would people talk?
The conversation. So look at unanswered questions. Look at unsupported assertions. Blogging is hard. Look at unsupported assertions. Blogging is hard.
Blogging. Did you hear that? I think this is. Now let's see if it's clean.
Blogging is hard.
All right, we can tighten that up. Back up and listen a little bit.
Look at unsupported assertions. Blogging is hard. Okay. How hard?
So, yeah, these gaps are a little long. So I'm going to hand shorten the gaps instead of relying on Audacity's truncate silence.
Blogging is hard. Okay. How hard? Blogging takes time. It's hard. Okay. How hard? Blogging takes time. How much time? This. How hard? Blogging takes time. How much time? This works better than that. Really? Does it? How much better?
Okay, that last one was too short. So I'm going to get rid of that. Then leave a pretty big gap there.
Blogging takes time. How much time? This works better than that. Really? Does it? How much better? So to get.
Actually, I want to mess with that. I don't know. Let's see what it looks like. Is that going to mess up this camera? No, it's not. No, maybe it is. I don't think so. All right. Sorry. Messing around with Ecamm Live. By the way, this is coming to you via Ecamm Live, which is a Mac-based broadcasting application, which I bought a long time ago, and it's working great, and I love it. I don't have the Pro. I paid for the all buy the app once and have it forever, as opposed to the Pro edition, which gives you a lot more features, but you have to pay monthly. Again, cheap ass rat bastard. That's just the way it works.
This works better than that. Really? Does it? How much better? So to give a credible answer.
So to give a credible answer.
So to give a credible answer, and it's nowhere near statistically relevant, you got to ask a lot of people what's working for them.
A lot of people what's working for them.
You got to ask a lot of people what's working for them, how much time they spend. You got to ask a lot of people what's working for them, how much time they spend, how long they write to get good answers. So we knew from the beginning that it had to be a large enough group. So we started with 1,000. I had
There's a click in there, so I'm going to get rid of that click.
large enough group. So we started with 1,000. I had, I don't have a big.
There's a, I don't have a.
I had, I don't have a big audience really. So I had to do a lot of individual one-to-one outreach to get 1,000 people to answer these questions. But then it immediately.
Yeah, this is like hand kerning type.
1,000 people to answer these questions. But then it immediately made us.
And the only people who hand kern type are graphic designers who actually care. So this is my audio version of hand kerning type.
1,000 people to answer these questions. But then it immediately made us more relevant. It immediately started a conversation because
Ooh, that was a B. I cut off the B on because.
Started a conversation because, 7 years ago. Relevant. It immediately started a conversation because, 7 years ago, we learned the average blog post is 400 words. Now the average blog post.
I think, well, let's leave it.
Average blog post is 400 words. Now the average blog post is almost 1,300 words. You get the longitudinal data, you keep doing it over time. You get the longitudinal data, you keep doing.
Okay, sometimes Zoom will add like gaps like that, longitudinal data.
Almost 1,300 words. You get the longitudinal data, you keep doing it over time. And it.
This is what I love about Andy, man.
You get the longitudinal data, you keep doing it over time, and it just supports other people's messages.
He always brings the data. Someone like me is nothing but opinion for the most part. Opinion and experience.
Supports other people's messages.
But I really appreciate the guys that bring the numbers. I'm not a numbers guy, though.
Supports other people's messages, right? Like, I need more budget. Supports other people's messages, right? Like, I need more.
Ooh, I bet you I.
Supports other people's messages. People's messages.
Let's see if I can get this sounding a little bit better. People's. Make sure you grab everything that comes after and drag it forward. Otherwise, you're going to lose synchronization.
Supports other people's messages, right? Like, I need more budget to do this well because people that do this well are spending 6 hours on an article. Look, see? an article. Look, see? So, or you know, we have a bias against.
So that's a bunch of temporizing. What? So he's making a change of
6 hours on an article. Look, see? We have a bias against.
Look, see? Leave that big gap in there.
6 hours on an article. Look, see? We have a bias against paid. I don't ever want to do paid advertising. But wait, people who do paid are far more likely to report.
Okay.
People who do paid are far more likely to report.
All right, so this chunk of wordage is a mess and kind of chokes things up. Let's see if this helps it.
Wait, people who do paid are far more likely to report strong results from digital. Look, there it is. So it is a.
So it is a. Think musically. So it is a. Pause, pause, pause.
It is a way to.
Leave it in because it's part of his vocal style. But tighten it up because people are listening.
So it is a way to differentiate. It's a way to
cut these down significantly because they're a little long.
It's a way to differentiate. It's a way to
okay, that
to
join up this to. I'm gonna cut it there and see if I can do this. It's a way to.
It's a way to.
There's a little bit of a hiccup there, but
to.
I think it'll iron itself out in encoding the MP3 file. So I'm gonna take a chance there.
It's a way to contribute.
See that click? I don't like clicks like that. It's a way to
differentiate. It's a way to contribute.
Okay, so it's a way to contribute.
It's a way to contribute.
Oh, I can get rid of that obnoxious "to" by doing that.
Differentiate. It's a way to contribute.
Bingo.
It's a way to.
This is why I edit my own podcast. I get to make the decisions on quality things like that.
It's a way to contribute. It's a way to grow awareness, reputation.
Grow awareness, reputation, all that crap.
Contribute. It's a way to grow awareness, reputation, personal brand. So personal brand. But that strategy, and you just saw personal brand. But that strategy, and you just saw us do it for the 7th year, is simply to and you just saw us do it for the 7th year, is simply to
pull that back a little bit.
And you just saw us do it for the 7th year, is simply to produce the data.
So you can see I'm taking out significant time in this podcast, which is great because I want it to be high value, not high.
Here is simply to
high length.
To produce the data point, the statistic, the soundbite, supported by research that people in your field will find you. In your field will find.
So again, some weird zoomness. So field. Let's see if that works.
That people in your field will find you.
Ooh, that was weird.
That people in your field will find you.
Get more of that. People in your field?
That people in your field will find useful.
I think that worked.
Or controversial. or controversial, which Michelle Lynn always says, right? Poke the bear or bust a myth. No, those are even better. Our blogger survey does. No, those are even better. Poke the bear or bust a myth. No, those are even better. Our blogger survey doesn't really bust any myths, but you and I in a 5-minute brainstorming session could come up with some really. Blogger survey doesn't really bust any myths, but you and I in a 5-minute brainstorming session could come up with some really interesting data points that would immediately.
That would immediately.
Come up with some really interesting data points that would immediately turn into a headline, like maybe even news headline.
Like maybe even news headline.
Headline, like maybe even news headline.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, if I've got the, absolutely. I mean, if I've got the word count right. Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, absolutely. I mean, you
want to absolutely. I mean, let's just leave it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, if I've got the
word count, I don't need the second U.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, if I've got the word count right, this blog post in its own right is about 3,900 words.
I'm gonna get that pimple, that hiccup out of the way.
Own right is about 3,900 words, close to. Right is about 3,900 words, close to 4,000 words. And you've got, I didn't even count the number. I didn't even count.
It's got
words. And you've got, I didn't even count the number of graphs and images and pull quotes or quotes from other influencers and experts in the field. And, you go through this thing, this single post, and, you go.
Okay, there's a breath in there I don't like. So cut it out, shorten it up, and see how it sounds.
Experts in the field, and you go through this thing, and experts in the field, and you go through this. And experts in the field, and you go through this thing, this single post, and it's a masterclass on everything that this post is talking about, right? You're talking about word counts that are ballooning up.
That are ballooning up.
Talking about word counts that are ballooning up in spite of the fact that we tend to have less and less time, or so we think. You've got multiple experts involved to bring their audiences in. Seriously.
Blah, blah, blah.
You think, you've got multiple experts involved. Think, you've got multiple experts involved to bring their audiences in. Seriously.
Get rid of that.
Seriously.
So,
seriously. Experts involved to bring their audiences in. Seriously. And I should say to any listener, if you want to take a look at this new blogging statistics, blogging still works, especially for the 10% of bloggers who do things very differently. Blog post, just go to orbitmedia.com/blog. And right now, as we're talking about this on Wednesday, September 30th, it'll be the current blog 30th. It'll be the current.
it,
as we're talking about this on Wednesday, September 30th, it'll be the current blog post. But if not, just search for blog post. But if not, just search for new blogging statistics and you'll find this article about which we're talking. And you will see why I think Andy Crestodina is probably the best exemplar I can think of the best example.
let's cut that a little bit.
Crestodina is probably the best exemplar I can think of someone who is using blogs and data and becoming what I like to call a one of one as opposed to a one of many. And this goes back to what you said earlier, Andy, about coming up with the statistic that is only yours, or the point of view or the discovery that is yours. Because what you do is you create yourself as a node that everyone can connect to, because everyone who wants to cite that is going to say, by the way, here's the source, because having a source makes your assertion on your blog post or in conversations with your boss far more authoritative, because you have an authority behind it.
Yep, exactly right.
So let me ask you this question. Year one.
All right, so this is a good place for me to drop my first promo. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to grab this, move it back, and this is why I move the back half of this significantly back. Oh, and what's that down there? My speaking promo. Whoop, I don't want to move it up there. I always keep a buffer track because it's easier to grab sections of the podcast without messing things up if you don't have anything immediately below it. So I'm going to go like this, and let's see how that works out. The music bed is up so we can listen to it.
Authoritative, because you have an authority behind it.
Yep, exactly right.
So I'm going to give him his, yep, exactly right, in the clear. Let's see how that.
Because you have an authority behind it.
Yep, exactly right.
This episode of the Nonfiction Brand podcast is brought to you by Culture Chicken Brand Egg. What's that? It's one of my most requested presentations, now available as in-person live or virtual online presentations. If you've got a group or association that loves presentations that inspire, inform, entertain, and get you going at the same time, we should talk. Head on over to dpknutton.com/speaking to download my full speaker media kit today. And let's start talking about how I can help you get your party started.
All right, and this is where I bring the rest of this back. Ooh, and make sure I don't run over. Okay, I got to grab all this stuff. So the safest way to do it is like that. And then bring it forward to something like that. Dun, 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 dun.
You get your party started.
So let me ask you this question. Year one of the annual blogging survey that has yet to actually have an annual associated with it. When you came out with this versus where you are now in year 7, what has your personal When you came out with this versus where you are now in year 7, what has your personal brand trajectory been? Were you the international blog expert that you are today back then? Expert that you are today back then?
Well, as far as like personal brand or reputation, let's put it
Yeah, he's trying to be humble. He's trying to be humble. I don't want him to be humble because he deserves
like
not
personal
being humble.
brand or reputation. So let's put it in perspective. I'm a non-famous marketer.
I'm going to leave his humble.
I'm a non-famous marketer. I'm
Oh,
not internationally famous. No,
I beg
could
to
list
differ.
no, I'm not in the top. We know who they are, and I love them. We know who they are.
I'll get rid of that. That one,
No, I'm not in the top. We know who they are, and I love them, and am honored to call a few of them friends, and I've learned so much from them, and we could name the actual luminaries, the legit thought leaders who started long before me and have taught me so much. But it has been effective.
But it has been effective.
Started long before me and have taught me so much. But it has been effective at growing the company's.
I think that's a little too tight. Pull it back a little bit.
Before me and have taught me so much. But it has been effective at growing the company's brand, at growing the personal brand, and at growing the person. At growing the company's brand, growing the personal brand, it gets so. Let's just take.
So let's just take.
Company's brand, growing the personal brand. So let's just take like.
That's too tight.
Company's brand, growing the personal brand. So let's just take like straight PR. If it's a. Let's just take like straight PR. If it's a. Like straight PR. If a measurement of one's personal brand. Like straight PR. If a measurement of one's personal brand is the extent. Let's just take like straight PR. If a measurement of one's personal brand is the extent and frequency at which they are mentioned in media. The extent and frequency at which they are mentioned in media. That article at which they are mentioned in media. That article indirectly, just because I have the byline. That article indirectly, just because I have the byline on it, it's not really about me, it's about the content. That article gets cited by a major blog about once a week. Major blog about once a week. Without any outreach, without any pitches, it just gets picked up. Without any outreach, without any pitches, it just gets picked up, and and it supports something else. And it supports.
Okay, there's a weird clause in there that makes no sense. Get rid of it.
Pitches. It just gets picked up, and it supports something else someone else was saying. So it is absolutely.
So it is.
Something else someone else was saying. It is absolutely a PR home run to have a URL on this website that is the source of all this data. And to your point, it's like a note. It's helping them. Basically, like, it is good for. And to your point, it's like a note. It's helping them. Basically, like, it is good for, it's the first slide of people's presentations, or it gets mentioned in their book because they're talking about something where this is, you can think of it this way. Because they're talking about.
You could think of it this way.
Gets mentioned in their book because they're talking about, you can think of it this way. Look at your industry and ask yourself, what is the frequently asserted but rarely supported thing?
Oh, I like that. So,
you can think of it this way.
So this I'm writing down as 818 as a possible pull quote.
Look at your industry and ask yourself, what is the frequently asserted but rarely supported thing in your field? What are people always talking about, but they don't? Asserted but rarely supported thing in your field. What are people always talking about, but they don't really have evidence to back it up? If you create that evidence to back up that thing that people are frequently saying, then you could then create that evidence to back up that thing that people are frequently saying, then you're helping them by giving them.
Then you're helping them.
Back up that thing that people are frequently saying, then you're helping them by giving them evidence to support that message. So find the missing statistic is another way to look at that. So find the missing statistic is another way to look at that. And there are missing statistics in every industry. And there are missing statistics in every industry, in every field, in every conversation. People say stuff that is just an assertion, but not supported. So let's get.
But not supported.
An assertion, but not supported. So let's give them data to support it.
I think that's a good place for that pull quote. So that'll be 2851. That's a little long, but with internal edits due to pauses and stuff, that'll tighten up nicely, I think.
Every conversation, people say stuff that is just an assertion, but not. It's in every industry, in every field, in every conversation. People say stuff that is just an assertion, but not supported. So let's give them data to support it.
So let's give them data to support it. Yeah, I need to shorten this whole thing up. So I go from the beginning.
You can think of it. Think of it this way. Look at your industry.
All right, I'm doing what I shouldn't do, which is just grabbing one
this way.
segment.
Look at your industry and ask yourself. You can think of it this way. Look at your industry and ask yourself, what is the frequently.
Ask yourself.
Look at your industry and ask yourself, what is the frequently asserted but rarely supported thing in your field?
In your field. Just by tightening this up.
Supported thing in your field. What are people always talking about, but they don't really have evidence to. Thing in your field. What are people always talking about, but they don't really have evidence to back it up? What are people always talking about, but they don't really have evidence to back it up? If you create that evidence to back up that thing that people are frequently saying.
You can see how much time I'm taking out of this thing.
people are frequently saying, then you're helping them by giving them evidence to support that message. So find the missing statistic. Statistic is another way to look. So
T. Dun, 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 dun.
Support that message. So find the missing statistic is another way to look at that. And there are missing statistics in every industry, in every field, in every conversation. People say stuff that is just an assertion, but not support it. So let's give them data to support it.
All right, so that was at 51. It's now at 48. There you go. Take out 3 full seconds. That's not weird. And leave that about there.
Data to support it.
Well, I'm reminded.
Data to support it.
I'm reminded of earlier.
Give them data to support it.
I'm reminded of earlier in my career, I worked in an agency where they had a client that had a certain board member named Alan Greenspan, who was actually the chairman of the Fed at the time, or shortly chairman of the Fed at the time, or shortly after, it was after his tenure there. And he suggested they come up with their own unique metric.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
and their own unique metric.
Mm-hmm.
And that metric
Mm-hmm.
and that metric is now cited on an I think a multi-annual basis, I think several times a year, because it's about employment. And and all of a sudden it becomes because it's about employment. And all of a sudden it becomes the
Get rid of that and because I have 2 ands. I can trim. Oops. I can trim that out.
because it's about employment.
Yep.
And all of a sudden it becomes the brand name employment data statistic or employee metric or whatever it is. And it's cited continually because they are the ones who generated it. And the brilliant the thing I took away generated it. And the thing I took away from that was because they are the ones who generated it. The thing I took away from that was I had no idea that Alan Greenspan was such a fantastic marketer. But based on everything you just described, I don't know if he intuited that or if he intuited that or if he had a unique understanding as a world-class economist that coming up with that distinct metric that is only yours, that you can then own, creates an that you can then own, creates an own creates a position of authority.
Creates a position of authority.
That you can then own, create a position of authority.
Ooh, that was weird.
Creates a position of authority.
I think what I need to do is grab some of that. Creates
a position of.
Yeah, there you go.
Own creates a position of authority for you that other people for you that other people will continually burnish. Other people will continually burnish,
Sure.
to make it bigger and better every single year, which is, again, year 7.
Heard a breath in there.
Again, year 7. Is, again, year 7.
Okay, there's that beginning of...
Which is, again, year 7 of the blogger report here. And again, I didn't have to count the charts because I'm looking at the copy. You did the counting for me. 33 charts, 13 experts, and hundreds of blogging statistics that reveal some fascinating insights into an industry in flux. That's what I love. Industry in flux. That's what I love. In flux. That's what I love about that. It's the influx, because right now a lot of people are saying no one reads blogs anymore. Blogs are nothing. And what you're saying is nothing. And what you're...
There's a breath in here.
Blogs are nothing. And what you're saying is, no, blogging's still around, but it's changing. And some of the data contained in this report is compelling because the stat that you talked about earlier.
There's a hiccup in there I don't need.
The stat that you talked about earlier. It used to be 400.
See that click? Don't want that click, so might as well get rid of it.
Talked about earlier. It used to be 400 words was a blog post. Now it's more like...
I want to keep as but I don't need the click before it.
Words was a blog post. Now it's more like 1,300. And in some of the recommendations in here, you're saying, no, it should be more like 2,000 with at least 7 images, with multiple experts cited, with.
Let's go back, get this, make sure we grab again, get both of them.
Multiple experts cited, with. And so consequently, you're creating...
And so consequently, I don't need the and. Oh, so consequently...
Cited, with. So consequently, you're creating this cited, with. So consequently, you're creating this resource that is tremendous. You're creating this resource that is tremendously usable by a lot of people, including...
See another hiccup there? Get rid of it. That way. Did that drag? Yeah, that. Just wanted to make sure it didn't move the sync.
Usable by a lot of people, including listeners on the Nonfiction Brand podcast. So I cannot recommend enough, guys. Check out Orbit. Check out. Check out Orbit. Recommend enough, guys. Check out orbitmedia.com/blog and look for this because it is a wealth. I mean, it's literally tons of information. It's literally tons of information that, if nothing else, gets you thinking. And
Yeah.
and
I like his yeah. I don't think I need my and. So I'll get rid of my and. Keep his yeah.
thinking.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to say about you. Gets you thinking.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to say about you, Andy Crestodina, is you always get me thinking, which is why I consider you one of those top national international marketing people, because I don't get conventional people, because I don't get conventional wisdom from you. I don't get wisdom from you. I don't get your take on conventional wisdom. You always bring something new to the table. It's like you're a farm. Something new to the table. It's like you're a farm to table chef that continually delights and surprises.
I've got, so I have a content strategy and I've got,
It's in surprises.
I have a content strategy and it's sufficient for us to meet our goals. I see limits in it. I see limits.
Get rid of us whenever possible because they're annoying AF.
For us to meet our goals. I see limits in it. I was.
Are we doing on time? Okay. Still got plenty to go.
In it. I was on a, so speaking of contributor quotes and voice and differentiation, I have a quotes and voice and differentiation. I have quotes and voice and differentiation. I have a theory and I like to run. I have a theory and I have a theory and speaking of contributor quotes and voice and differentiation, I have a theory and I'd like to run it by you. There are some percentage differentiation. I have a theory and I'd like to run it by you. There are some percentage, this is in the study, some percentage of bloggers publish opinion. Publish opinion and they take a stand and they do things that are more controversial. They do op-ed content, basically. And I think that can be op-ed content, basically. And I think that that can be effective. Op-ed content, basically. And I think that that can be effective, and we all know bloggers that have done well with that by putting themselves out there to be for and against something. That's never really been my content strategy so much. But I had a conversation with someone who said that we're sort of in a post single point of view era. With someone who said that we're sort of in a post single point of view era for content, and that all content should single point of view era for content, and that all content should include contributor quotes or outside sources or expert points of view. Outside sources or expert points of view. So my theory is, unless you are publishing strong opinion, every article should include, or every piece of content should include others in it, the way we're producing content right now. There's two of us here, different points of view. Is that, do you think that that's overstated? Us here, different points of view. Is that, do you think that that's over? Content right now, there's two of us here, different points of view. Do you think that that's overstating it, or is that, would you agree that, you know, do you think that that's overstating it, or would you agree that, you know, you have to either have strong opinion or have multiple points of view in your content? To view in your content.
My opinion is kind of twofold. One, there are polemicists. Twofold. One, there are polemicists, the people who exist on the polls, and they don't want to convince anyone. They just want to attract like minds and have a like mind party, you know, where they're constantly just echoing back and forth. Those conversations tend to be data light on purpose, because any data that might mitigate their polemic stance, like, well, you know, it's not really quite that bad, that doesn't serve their purposes. But on the other end, in what I would call the reality-based world, or the, you know, the world where the sky is blue, I think you're absolutely right, especially if you want to be a founded marketing concern or entity. Meaning, when I say founded, I mean on a foundation. Meaning, when I say founded, I mean on a foundation. If you want to be standing on solid ground as opposed to shifting sand, I think you're absolutely right, because the reality is the Google gives all of us instant access to individual experts that can confirm our biases or whatever else. The goal, what you're talking about, is I don't want to present just a biased view. I want to present an empirically provable view or point of view for your consideration. Because, sorry, long-winded answer, but because Andy Crestodina and Orbit Media, we are a reality-based, authority-based, data-based marketing concern. Data-based marketing concern or entity. If you don't want that, there are plenty of people who can serve you. But
Mm-hmm.
but plenty of people can serve you.
Mm-hmm.
But we want the people who want that. And but we want the people who want that. And
Mm-hmm.
so
Yeah.
I don't know if I can for you other than to say who want that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know if I can shorthand that for you other than to say there are people who want to opine and people who want to convince, convert, engage, and have a long-term sustainable relationship. And that's and have a long-term sustainable relationship. And that's my take on it.
Yeah, I think that for those who want to opine on a topic, they're probably paying attention to a lot of social metrics because that's what you get out there on that end. Because that's what you get out there on that end. It's like, did I there on that end? It's like, did I out there on that end? It's like, did I
It's too tight.
there on that end? It's like, did I stir it up? It's like, did I stir it up? Did I
Right.
start some controversy? Did this trigger comments or shares? They probably or shares. They probably are paying attention to different probably are paying attention to different measurements of they probably are paying attention to different measurements of quality and success. I think there's a lot of people different measurements of quality and success. I think there's a lot of people like that, and the worst
Yeah.
of which you're talking about, like an internet troll.
Right.
But there are plenty of people who've built a content strategy based on provocative content. There are plenty of people who've built a content strategy based on provocative content, which I think can be could be valuable. Based on provocative content, which I think could be valuable if the person's a legitimate expert. It's a question about thought leadership, right? Is that person actually like deserve the title? It's a question about thought leadership, right? Is that person actually like deserve the title of thought leader because they're taking a stand and they've got an expert perspective on something? A stand and they've got an expert perspective on something.
And Kerning podcasts.
And they've got an expert perspective on something. There's other people who
Get rid of crap you don't need. Clean it up.
Perspective on something. There's other people who are perspective on something. There's other people who are taking, just putting out strong opinion without back. Are taking, just putting out strong opinion without backing it up, and that's kind of just like being a jerk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it wherever thus.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it wherever the. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it wherever thus. Back in the day, we can think back to. Back in the day, we can think back to. Back in the day, we can think back to marketing where I think there was a book. Back to marketing where I think there was a book called The Persuaders, or maybe it was a movie. I can't remember which, but the old story is a guy is in a boardroom and he spits on the table and he points out, and people are discussing. Spits on the table and people are disgusted by it. And he says, yeah, but you'll never forget that. And it's that type of crapvertising that a lot of people love to. Still, you can see it. I mean, any Bitcoin thing you ever see is going to be a little bit of that. And, the guys leaning against. Any. Love to. Still, you can see it. The guys leaning. Still, you can see it. The guys leaning against the Ferrari with the fat stacks of cash. Leaning against the Ferrari with the fat stacks of cash and the top 10 ways to do this, blah, blah, blah. That stuff always exists. The question is, stuff always exists. The question is, does your personal brand want to do that, or does it want to do something else? And want to do that, or does it want to do something else? And that's what the whole nonfiction branding thing I do is all about. It's about knowing who you are so you can be it, so that you can truly communicate who you are, what you do, and how. Who you are, what you do, and how you do it in a way that differentiates you in the marketplace. And again, I'm pointing. Again, marketplace. And again, I'm pointing to my guest today, Andy Crestodina of Orbit Media Studios in Chicago, Illinois, who does a fantastic job at this. And am I correct in saying that for you personally, blogging is kind of your number one personal branding strategy? Branding strategy?
Fun question. It definitely generates the most visibility because blog content, when generates the most visibility because blog content, when once published, stays out there in a persistent, very accessible, findable way. Writing a short way to describe our content strategy. It's pretty simple, right? Detailed long form detailed long form how-to content optimized to rank for, optimized to rank.
It's kind of weird. I'm going to see if I can get rid of it.
Long form how-to content optimized to rank for, we're writing search optimized how-to posts about doing things that are a little more difficult or a little bit more deeper or complex. Or a little bit more deeper or complex with another angle on that thing. How to write a headline, how to track video views in Google Analytics, how to do original research.
Got to get out some of these breaths because when I compress it, it's going to bring up the breath
angle
sound
on that thing. How to write a headline.
Yeah, there's some lip noise or teeth noise, tongue noise in there.
How to write a headline, how to track video views in Google Analytics, how to do original research for marketing goals, how to, so there's lots and lots of that. So there's lots and lots of that content. How to do original research for marketing goals, how to, so there's lots and lots of that content. How to do original research for marketing goals. So there's lots and lots of that content.
Pull that back a little bit.
Marketing goals. So there's lots and lots of that content, which creates like 1 million readers a year. That's a lot. That's a lot. The engagement with. That's a lot. The engagement with that audience is very shallow. So you have quantity, but.
So you have quantity.
So you have quantity, but not really high quality like we're doing right now. There are other. Not really high quality like we're doing right now. There are other formats for content that. Right now. There are other formats. We're doing right now. There are other formats for content that will give you much smaller reach, but much higher quality of engagement. Smaller reach, but much higher quality of engagement, right? You and I met at a live event.
Right.
Shook hands, hugged, see face to face, right? Looked at pictures on each other's phones.
Right.
That was a real human interaction. So there's. That was a real human interaction. So there's, depending on your.
So depending on your.
That was a real human interaction. So depending on your goals, I think you could look at this different ways. Blogging creates a ton of visibility, but not. A ton of visibility, but not personal connections. Creates a ton of visibility, but not personal connections as much. It takes excellent writing to try to make a real personal personal connections as much. Takes excellent connections as much. It takes excellent writing to try to make a real like personal connection through text. It's very difficult. It's the what writers struggle to do all the time. Video, very good, right? Strong. Video, very good, right? Stronger connection. Video, very good, right? Stronger connection. Smaller. Very good, right? Stronger connection, smaller reach, right? There's not as many connection, smaller reach, right? There's not as many, that stuff isn't as findable. There's not as many, that stuff isn't as findable. Smaller reach.
That stuff isn't as findable.
Smaller reach. That stuff isn't as findable from search, and there aren't, 50 people watching these videos at this moment. There could be 50 people reading videos at this moment. There could be 50 people reading videos at this moment. There could be 50 people reading those articles at this moment. And then live, and I'm an old school Gen X. And then live, and I'm an old school Gen.
I'm gonna leave all that mess in there because I'm not sure how to cut that up.
People reading those articles at this moment. And then live, and I'm an old school Gen X high touch kid. Like I'd. High touch kid, like face to face is my idea. I'd rather, so probably blogging and present. Face to face is my idea. I'd rather, so probably face to face is my idea. I'd rather, so probably blogging and
Let's see what that sounds like. So probably,
like face to face is my idea. I'd rather, probably blogging and presentations are my two best channels. My two best channels, search optimized blog posts and search, search optimized blog posts.
try that search out.
These are my two best channels: search optimized blog posts and live event presentations. And then with video kind of being this thing in the middle.
Yeah, I like the fact that they're mutually support. I like the fact that they're mutual. Yeah, I like the fact that they're mutually supportive channels.
Sure.
Because if channels.
Sure.
Because if someone sees your blog and says, wow, this guy. Someone sees your blog and says, wow, this guy he brings the goods. Wow, this guy he brings the goods. We should have him speak. He brings the goods. We should have him speak. Then you go speak at the event and 50 to 500 people are there and half of them go, wow, this guy's really solid. I got to check out his blog. And then all of a sudden they're looking for perhaps a new website or some of the services that Orbit Media does. They already know that you're really personal. they already know that you're really personable and data oriented and something well oriented and something well above what's available. Something well above what's available via Squarespace and Wix and all those kind of fast and dirty fast and dirty web shop.
Yep.
Kind of fast and dirty and all those kind of fast and dirty web shops.
Yeah,
Web shops.
Yeah,
fast and dirty web shops.
Yeah, DIY.
Web shops.
Yeah, DIY approach. Yeah, there's another way.
That that all of a sudden and the that
approach. Yeah, there's another way.
That all of a sudden and the beauty is if you were that marketing director and you had to go to your boss and say
yeah, there's another way.
That all of a sudden and the beauty is if you were that
approach. Yeah, there's another way.
And the beauty is if you were that marketing director and you had to go to your boss and say, I want to talk to these guys. You've just armed them with a boatload of arguments that especially data-oriented C-suite types would be all about. You know, this is not, you know, intuitively when you meet you get the fact that would be all about. Intuitively, when you meet you get the fact that, oh, nice guy, Midwestern, feet on the ground, very cool, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But when you get the blog post with all that data in there, you go, oh, intellectual rigor, because I want intellectual rigor. Go, oh, intellectual rigor, because I want intellectual rigor as an engine for our website or the foundation or the structure for our website. And I don't want to be sold smoke and mirrors, because every time I talk to someone about digital marketing, I smell the smoke and I see the mirrors.
It has a bad rap. I have anecdotal evidence that it's I have anecdotal evidence. It has a bad rap. I have anecdotal evidence that it's effective in sales. Total evidence that it's effective in sales, which is partly what you're talking about, right? Which I love with the bottom line. right? You'd rather have great sales than great marketing if you had to choose. So we build websites.
Shorten this up a little bit. Yeah, I think so.
Great sales and great marketing if you had to choose. So we build websites. We have a process for following up, checking to make sure that everyone was satisfied, or like, what could we have done better? And some of the feedback has been, we love being an Orbit client. Some of the feedback has been, we love being an Orbit client, partly because when we see the stuff you're Orbit client, partly because when we see the stuff you're publishing, it reaffirms that we made the right decision. So that's creating client satisfaction.
All right, so I'm going to move my exactly a little bit forward. I am agreeing with you violently.
That we made the right decision.
Exactly.
So that's creating client satisfaction. That's helpful. Another story I heard one day was, I met this Another story I heard one day was, I have a friend, she and I met years ago at a conference. She took one of our She took one of our articles, I think it was like how to do a content audit, and she gave it to her vendor and said, why aren't you doing this for me? And said, why aren't to her vendor and said, why aren't you doing this for me? You should do this for me. And that other vendor said, oh, that's Orbit. That's our competitor. And she said, what? And she called us up, and it's been our client. And she said, what? And she called us up, and it's been our client ever since.
Yep.
So when your clients or prospects use your content for training for themselves or to communicate internally, you're in a room that you could you're in a room that you could never be in otherwise. That's part of the magic of content. Or in a room that you could never be in otherwise. That's part of the magic of content, is that it's portable. People bring it with them. It comes into a conversation. It facilitates word of mouth. Sets point again, give people something to talk about. So it's not just generally giving people something to talk about as if they're standing on both sides of a fence, but you may.
This is another good quote.
Sides of a fence, but you may. As if they're standing on both sides of a fence, but you may end up, without knowing it, part of a conversation. Your content was carried into a boardroom. Your content was brought into a sales meeting. Your content is, we have a mutual friend who took one of our articles and turned it. We have a mutual. Sales meeting. Your content is, we have a mutual friend who took one of our articles and turned it. Content is, we have a mutual friend who took one of our articles and turned it into a service. I love hearing that. He's selling it. He just took that process, just laid out in detail, and now offers it to his clients. Great. I'm honored and thrilled to be. I'm honored. Just laid out in detail, and now offers it to his clients. Just laid out in detail, and now offers it to his clients. Great. I'm honored and thrilled to be making an impact indirectly through this other friend who translated one of our how-to guides into a service he now offers to his clients.
Oh, you are a better man than I, Gunga Din. Let me tell you, because I would take some umbrage at that. And let me tell you.
I want to check. Vintage vocal is sounding a little much, so I'm going to my other one, which is male vocal refresh, and see if I like that better.
Oh, you are a better man than I, Gunga Din. Let me tell you, because I would take some umbrage at that, because
I want to see if I've got a de-esser on this. Let's see.
yeah, because I would take some umbrage at that, because in
Okay, so there's that.
I would take some umbrage at that, because intellectual property,
Let's go back to vintage vocal, shall we? Take down that 5K area.
Gunga Din. Let me tell you, because I would take some umbrage at that, because intellectual property. Umbrage at that, because intellectual property, IP, well, that's what people like me do, people like you do. But I appreciate people like you do, but I appreciate the fact that you maintained a sensibility that is completely indicative of your character and your personal brand, dare I say, which is, I'm happy for the dude because he took it, he ran with it. I'm happy for the dude because he took it, he ran with it, etc. Yeah. So, boy,
interesting though. Interesting though. What you just brought up though is.
Okay, I think there's a good pull quote in here somewhere. I got to find it,
etc. Yeah. So
interesting though. What you just brought up though is fascinating.
Interesting though. What you just brought up is fascinating,
etc. Yeah. So
interesting though.
Because he took it, he ran with it.
Yeah. Interesting though. What you just brought up though is fascinating, and it's something that it stops people from becoming.
This might be a good place for. Oops, dang it.
What you just brought up though is.
What you just brought up though. I'm gonna write this down. Is at 2242.
Is fascinating, and it's something that it stops people from becoming content. It's something that it stops people from it stops people from becoming. What you just brought up though is fascinating, and it's something that it stops people from becoming content marketers, because that is almost like an emotion. Content marketers, because that is almost like That is almost like an emotion. People from becoming content marketers. That is almost like an emotion, which I've had, of course, and we all have. Am I giving away too? I've had, of course, and we all have. Am I giving away too much? Will a competitor take this and apply it? In my conclusion, will a competitor take this and apply it? Will a competitor take? Am I giving away too much? Will a competitor take this and apply it? And my conclusion is sort of like, I'm really not the first. Conclusion is sort of like, I'm really not the first and only person to publish that thing. Someone else has already written it anyway. Only person to publish that thing. Someone else has already written it anyway, probably. Maybe not, maybe from a slightly different angle or not as deep, but it's already out there. So one thing is, different angle or not as deep, but it's already out there. So one thing is, you can't really hoard knowledge. It's already out there. So one thing is, you can't really hoard knowledge anymore. It's like way past that era. Also, that friend of ours, you and I both know him. Also, that friend of ours, you and I both know him very well. Using both know him very well. Using that framework, and I both know him very well. Using that framework to offer. Friend of ours, you and I both know him very well. Using that framework to offer that service, does it cost me anything? Not at all. There's no risk or harm to me. Anything? Not at all. There's no risk or harm to me. I'm not competing for those same clients. I'm really not even offering that as a service. So it's no. Not even offering that as a service. So it's no, offering that as a service. So it's no, did it add value to the world? Service. Did it add value to the world? Yes. Was there a cost to me? Not really. Did that take anything away from what I do? No. So every time I have that feeling like, wow, am I really should I share this one? I don't want to talk about this. I mean, it's like the most valuable thing I've ever learned. That's when you're on the right track.
That's a good poll quote. How long is it? It's pretty long. To 20, 23, 39. That might be too long, but we'll see. I think it's this whole thing.
What you just brought up, though, is fascinating, and it's something that it stops people from becoming content marketers. That is almost like an emotion, which I have had, of course.
All right, I'm going to skip that because I want to get done with this because I'm getting hungry.
That's the moment. That's exactly the thing that you should publish, is like that thing that you think is a secret, which, by the way, isn't a secret anyway. It's already out there. Someone else has published it. Just go search for it. You'll find a version of it probably on YouTube. So content marketing is a test of. Content marketing is a test. Right, you'll find a version of it probably on YouTube. Content marketing is a test of generosity and the most generous marketer or brand wins. Think of it that way. You should be in a rush. We should be hustling to give away all the best advice we have, because that's our only currency. That's the only chance of catching any sort of attention or loyalty. That's the game we're actually playing, is to win a generosity contest.
I love that. So that might be a shorter.
Content marketing is a test of generosity.
That's good. So that's 2351.
Content marketing is a test of generosity, and the most generous marketer or brand wins. Think of it that way. You should liberty contest.
So that's 2411. 51. So that's about 14 seconds or so. Cool.
Listeners, do you hear what Andy's saying? Do you understand now why I am delighted whenever I get... Understand now why I am delighted... You hear what Andy's saying? Do you understand now why I am delighted whenever I get to see...
Why I am...
Understand now why I am delighted whenever I get... Understand now why I am delighted whenever I get to see him in person or talk to him via the podcast, and why... in person or talk to him via the podcast.
I don't know if it's his track or my track, so I'm going to get rid of a lot of his track.
Delighted whenever I get to see him in person or talk to him via the podcast, and why I will continue to seek to have him on the podcast whenever possible, because that possible, because that whole strategy of this being a generosity, this being a generosity, of this being a generosity race. Wow, that's something I'm... a generosity race. Wow, that's something I'm going to be chewing on for the next week, I guarantee you. And next week, I guarantee you. And for the next week, I guarantee you. And I invite you listeners.
See, I always have to go back and grab that thing I already cut, which means I shouldn't have already cut it.
Next week, I guarantee you. And I invite you listeners to do it as well, because we're going to have Andy back on next week's podcast too, continuing this conversation. But for now,
I think I got to put my noise gate back on. Where was it? It was at 29.
Conversation. But for now, I got to wrap this up because we're coming up on the half hour. I'm DP Knudten for the Nonfiction Brand podcast. But for now, I got to wrap this up because we're coming up on the.
I don't want to talk about the half hour.
But for now, I got to wrap this up. I'm DP Knudten for the Nonfiction Brand.
Got to wrap this up.
I got to wrap this up. I'm DP Knudten for the Nonfiction Brand podcast. I would love for you to like, subscribe, refer, and most of all, review this podcast because that helps other people. Because that helps us do this podcast, because that helps other people find us. But until next week, I just want to say once again, I am DP Knudten, and he. Find us. But until next week, I just want to say once again, I am DP Knudten, and he is. But until next week, I just want to say once again, I am DP Knudten, and he is. Until next week, I just want to say once again, I am DP Knudten, and but until next week, I just want to say once again, I am DP Knudten, and he is
Andy.
Until next week, I just want to say once again, I am DP Knudten, and he is. I am DP Knudten, and he is
Andy Crestodina. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, it's always my pleasure. We will talk to you. I am DP Knudten, and he is
Andy Crestodina. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, it's always my pleasure. My pleasure. We will talk to you. We will talk to you. Oh, it's always my pleasure. We will talk to you. Oh, it's always my pleasure. We will talk to you next week. Bye-bye.
Offers to his clients.
Oh, you are a better man.
In this thing in the middle.
Yeah, I like the fact that they're mutually supportive channels.
Sure.
You know, because if someone sees your blog and says, wow, this guy he brings the goods, we should have him speak, then you go speak at the event and 50 to personal branding strategy.
Fun question. should include, or every piece of content should include others in it, the way we're producing content right
Have a long-term sustainable relationship, and that's my take on it.
Yeah, I think that for those who want to opine on a topic, they're probably paying attention to, that's kind of just like being a jerk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it were ever thus. Back in the day, we can think back to marketing where I think there was a book called The Persuaders, or maybe it was a movie, a branding strategy.
Fun question. They've got an expert perspective, jerk.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it were.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it were ever thus. Back in
That's kind of just like being a jerk.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are taking, just putting out strong opinion without backing it up, and that's kind of just like being a jerk.
Yeah. It were ever thus. Back. It were ever thus. Back in the day, we can think back to marketing where I think there was a book called The Persuaders, or maybe it was a movie. I can't remember which, but the old story is a guy is in a boardroom and he spits on the table and people are disgusted by it. And he says, yeah, but you'll never forget that. And it's that type of crap advertising that a lot of people love to. Still, you can see it. I mean, see you next week. Bye-bye.
All right. All right. Oh. All right. So I've got a bunch of stuff left to do in the creation of this bad boy. So how long have I been streaming? 2 hours, 14 minutes. That's crazy. So I'm going to hang up the phone right now, but thanks for watching, and I'll be back periodically working on this GarageBand Podcast Editing 101. Is that what I'm calling this thing? GarageBand Podcast Editing in Real Life 101. So I'll be back here periodically working on my podcast on a weekly basis. So if you have any questions about using GarageBand to actually create a decent sounding podcast, talk to me. That's all I'm going to say. That's it for me tonight or today. I'll talk to you later tonight when I work on my book, because I can't get enough of this live streaming madness. And yeah, that whole thing is called Bookward Bound, my 301-day journey from I should really do this to done, where I create and write and edit and design and move a book forward that I'm going to be self-publishing on Amazon's Kindle Direct Publishing by January 1st of 2021. How am I going to get that book done? By working on it every single day in real life, in real time, via live stream. Tonight will be episode or consecutive day 211. Yeah, crazy, stupid if you ask me, but I made the commitment to you and to myself, so I'm going to do it. And so I'll be talking to you later. That's it for GarageBand Podcast Editing in Real Life 101 with DP Knudten, which happens to be me. I'll see you next time. So until then, theme music, take us on out. See you tonight. Bye-bye.